This episode is brought to you by Netflix. From the creator of Homeland, Claire Danes and Matthew Rhys star in the new Netflix series, The Beast in Me, as ruthless rivals whose shared darkness will set them on a collision course with fatal consequences. The Beast in Me is a riveting psychological cat and mouse story about guilt, justice, and doubt. You will not want to miss this. The Beast in Me launches November 13th, only on Netflix.
Turning headline news into punchline gold. 5 nights a week. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Imagine this. Money goes missing from your bank account. Nightmare, right? But there's a twist. How your bank handles fraud might actually make you more loyal to them or send you running for the hills. I'm here to discuss this with marketing professor at the University of Notre Dame, Vamsi Kanuri. Vamsi, welcome to the show.
Hi, David.
Let's start by the basic understanding of the study you did. You looked at how banks handle fraud to the individual consumer. What exactly did you test? How exactly did you start researching this?
Sure. So one of the things that we started working with a real bank. I can't name the name of the bank because we have an NDA, but this is a real bank in the U.S., one of the bigger banks. And we started hearing that the fraud's going up, right? So, and that piqued our interest because fraud actually affects not just banks, but also the customers that decide to, save their money in the bank, right? So, then, after talking to them for a few times, it became very clear that this is one of the pressing problems, not just at this bank, but also majority of the banks in the U.S. So we started delving more and studying more and understanding, the process of what happens, right? So essentially, when a customer loses or is subject to fraud, and the kind of fraud, just to clarify, that we are studying is where the customer or the bank doesn't really realize that the money is lost when the fraud was occurring. So this is after the fact, customers, log into their accounts like maybe 5 days later and then notice that money's been missing, right?
Yes. Are you talking like a sketchy cell phone gift card? Because that once happened to me. It was like $100. I'm like, I'm not buying cell phone gift cards, and I called my bank.
Yes, and that's the exact amount we are studying too. So on average in our study, we see people losing about $110, or around that number. But what that also means is, the fraudsters can actually fly under the radar. Actually, the banking industry calls them by bad actors, the fraudsters, bad
Sure.
actors. They're all the same. But anyway, so the bank has not caught them. The customers have not caught them in the act. And then the money is lost, right? So now customers, frustrated, they approach bank and there's a set process. There's a series of things that happen. So usually, sorry, you seem like you have a
Well,
question.
no, I remember what happened to me. I think
Okay.
they told me there was going to be like a 3-month investigation.
Yes.
And I was super annoyed. But then they said, we'll credit you the money right away.
Right.
And then if the investigation finds that it was fraud, it'll just, whatever. And then if the investigation finds it wasn't fraud, we're going to take the money back, which I found slightly annoying. But I was like, okay, at least they're not holding this $100 for 3 months or whatever. That's what happened with me.
That's exactly right, and that's a set process, right? So there's a federal regulation that says you got to return the money, and banks usually start an investigation. So uh, that's discretionary to the banks, right? So they can investigate, and most banks do investigate because they want to know how the fraud occurred. So next time they can stop the bad actors in their tracks, right? So they do investigate. But here's the kicker. Majority of the times, banks do not end up finding the perpetrator. Due to a lot of things, you would think in this day and age, where every digital footprint can be tracked, you would think, why can't banks do that? Well, due to a lot of regulatory reasons, and also, when you're working with different other banks, they may or may not cooperate. So for a lot of different reasons, majority of the time, uh, banks cannot find the perpetrator. So that is where we wanted to study. So we wanted to study, since all the customers that experience fraud already get their money back, there's a basic understanding, or at least a misunderstanding, that, fraud doesn't affect customers. So, but, then we asked, whether the resolution, that the bank comes up with, that is, whether they found the perpetrator or not, does that affect customer relationships? That is the key research question we tried to answer.
Okay, so and what did you end up finding? Like, if the bank tells me they caught the person and they give me insight into the investigation, I'll trust them more?
Yeah, so it's a nice puzzle that we tried to solve. So our hunch was that we won't find any effects, because all the customers literally got their money back, right? So it shouldn't really matter. But what we found was, in cases where the bank found or actually did not find the perpetrator, uh, it was looking up the number here. So we found that about 41%. So we compared them to customers that never experienced fraud. So there's apples to apples comparison, and we found that the attrition went up by 41%. So
So if
that's
fraud
huge.
occurred, even if they were refunded, these people would leave the
Yes,
bank?
that is correct.
Wow,
So,
that seems really high. I was just slightly annoyed by my bank, but
yes,
that's just the
so
common
a
bank
lot of
experience.
people really care about their money, right? So, but here's the counterintuitive finding: if the bank actually ended up finding the perpetrator, then the attrition went down, compared to the no fraud case, went down by 62%. So, what it means is, they were far less likely than someone that never experienced fraud to quit. So this we call the service recovery paradox.
But in both cases, the customer was refunded anyway, whether they caught the perp or
Exactly.
not. So it's
Exactly.
just this perception that the bank is doing something about it that makes people like their bank more?
So which we actually call and test and prove that it's blame attribution. So when the bank um, doesn't find the perpetrator, then we find that customers are more likely to attribute the fraud itself to the bank's inability to stop the perpetrators from,
Hmm.
taking the money out of your account. But when they do, then it reinforces what banks can do. So compared to the no fraud case, where customers never get an opportunity to see the firm's IT capabilities, these customers that have experienced fraud, they're now able to actually see what their bank can do when fraud occurs. So their loyalty with the bank actually goes up.
Interesting. And how do the banks tell the customer? Because I remember just getting an email like 3 months later saying, we closed the case. We found that the fraud was real. The refund that we already gave you, you can keep. No details. Like, are there banks that are actually giving customers details of the fraud?
Yes. So this particular bank, I can't speak for other banks because
Does it rhyme
I've
with
worked with them.
Hell's Wargo? Does it rhyme with JP Morgan Shez? All right.
Yeah, it's a big bank. So at this particular bank, what it did was, the fraud detection department, regardless of what their resolution is, when they entered that resolution into the system to close the case, an automatic mail went out, and there's a template, we're filling all the details, and customers would get that in their mail saying the bank either found the perpetrator or they did not find the perpetrator. Now, what is interesting is we even see these effects after 90 days, or how much ever time the bank took to actually resolve the case, right? So, and they got their money back. So fraud, resolution actually matters. Not just the fraud, but fraud resolution matters.
Sounds like it. And if there's any bankers listening and they catch fraud at their banks, tell their customers the details, I guess, is the takeaway. And be honest and transparent.
Exactly. And also, one other thing we want to note is, usually banks tend to think that fraud resolution is the end of fraud handling, but it's really the beginning of fraud handling, because, depending on what you find, the relationships may be at stake.
Vamsi, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Vamsi Kanuri is a marketing professor at the University of Notre Dame.